Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Well, do you guys want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, I'm good.
Let's go.
Alrighty. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2. Joining me today
A
is...
geek for fun.
And a geek for evil.
Oh, good. This
Is
is that.
See, he's British and he's noble, and I am American and I am evil. That's how it works.
Yeah, that's how that works.
So we're here today to do a review of the first 3 episodes of My Adventures with the Superman. This is the highly anticipated new Superman animated series, the first one since...
TAS.
I mean, I guess you could argue... Yeah, you could argue TAS. I would maybe argue that Legion of Superheroes is basically a Superman show, but, you know, that's more debatable.
I would hesitate to call, just while we're here, I would hesitate to call Legion of Superheroes a Superman show, in the same way I'd resist calling Justice League a Superman show, because he's not actually in every episode.
He's not, but, like, he's such a, like, central character to that series, compared to Justice League, where he's about as interchangeable as anyone else, but... Regardless, yes, this is the first new fully it's a show about Superman and Superman's world specifically since Superman the Animated Series. And this has been like something I think Alfie's been the most excited about, so I was really, really curious to see what he thought, and I wanted to like just have a discussion with him about it, and he's like, no, I'm going to tweet out all my thoughts, and so I've specifically tried to avoid reading them because I wanted to like hear it straight from the horse's mouth, because Alfie's got a nasty habit of being more sassy on Twitter than he is in a conversation. So either he needs to bring those things in balance. Either he needs to get less sassy on Twitter or more sassy in person.
Thankfully, at least.
Guess which one he picks right now.
I was actually thinking of this when I wrote that, because I wanted to... With Superman specifically, it's very easy for me to get lost in my own head sometimes, so I wanted to make sure that because I had been the one who's been the most vocal about it, so I wanted to kind of get my thoughts layered and sorted, because I didn't quite know how I felt about it until I wrote about it, if that makes sense. And then getting that helped me get a clear review. And then since that thread is kind of outdated now anyway, because I wrote that after 2 episodes and now we've watched 3, so I have got updated thoughts on those things. So I was keeping that in mind as well with these things to have a better conversation with you guys. So thank you for avoiding that. I'm glad you're doing. And all things considered, as snappy as I could be, actually, I think it was pretty tame on that one. I think I just like aspects of Superman too much that I was like, oh, I'll put my respectable gloves on for this one.
No, that's fair. I'm just talking in general. I'm not even talking in the thread.
In general,
sometimes
absolutely.
Alfie's takes on Twitter get like snappy.
Absolutely, in general, without a doubt.
Yeah. So I'm most curious to hear what your like general thoughts on it are, since you're the resident Superman stan above all of us. So I'm real curious, just what was your initial reaction and just your wide sweeping thoughts on My Adventures with Superman.
So going over when I watched the first episode, this has been something that like since it got announced, I want to say like almost 3 years ago. Maybe 2 at least like a late 2 years coming on 3 at the bare minimum. Because this got announced and then it like kept disappearing over and over and over again, and that was during the period as well where Warner Brothers was going through some major structural changes, and for the longest time, people kind of thought the show was dead, like it wasn't gonna come out at all because the animation industry was really suffering. And the way this looked and the way this produced from just the production stills, it looked like an actual animated series, like something that would require some money, something that would require some time and talent behind it. And seeing that kind of lose itself over time was definitely like a worrying prospect. But it's here, it came out, thankfully, and everyone on the internet went fucking crazy for it, which is a really nice feeling for a Superman thing. Just the public reception to this has probably been the most positive Superman only thing since like the fucking Christopher Reeve movie. like it's been a long time since the general audience is like unequivocally the Superman thing rocks. Which is why when I watched the first episode, I was a little bummed that I didn't walk away with that immediate love for it. The first 2 episodes of the show really disappointed me. It was a thing where overall, the just to jump into positive immediately, as I love the look of the show. It's one of those things where it leans heavily to a lot of stylistic choices I like, to the point where sometimes I was like, shit, man, I fucking drew that. Like, they just take my shit. Like, there was a lot of like things with that. I've been someone who, in this show, in our YouTube channel, anything with that, I've always advocated for, like, the key to making Superman a hit again is to give him some fucking Dragon Ball, to give him some anime, to give him some hit. And this show goes all in on that, to a certain extent. So visually, I think it moves well. It's not the most impressive thing in the world from a purely animation project, especially if you watch a lot of anime. So it going more anime stylized is kind of setting itself up for... You're not going to be having the same kind of amazing fight scenes and stuff that you see in something that's happening in like One Piece right now. But for an American cartoon, it's probably one of the best ones I've seen in a long time. If anyone's watched Spectacular Spider-Man, I'd rank it around there as like, I like this aesthetic more, but just in terms of the pure movement, I think Spectacular Spider-Man are very comparable. And compare this shit to the last bits that you guys have talked about with Young Justice, it's like night and day. Like, it's so nice to have a DC show that looks like this again. But then once you go into the more narrative aspects is where things immediately kind of take more of a downward swing. The most negative things I can say out of the bait is I have no idea who in charge was okayed with this. I have no idea why they voted, and it doesn't look to be getting better. The villains in this series are some of the weakest I've ever seen for anything, and I don't get why when everything else seems to have a little bit more thought put into it. But just from a design standpoint, from a conceptual standpoint, from an acting standpoint, from just bare bones plot, most superhero cartoons, even the bad ones, will get a pretty decent villain take here or there, and often the problem is the heroes. It's very rare that we've got one where like, oh no, the core cast is pretty good, but god, the villains suck. Like, that's a weird thing to say about a superhero cartoon. It's normally always the opposite. So that's an immediate red flag for me. I know Twitter is falling in love with her. I don't particularly care for the Lois take. I think the Lois Lane take is something I get that they're going for, but it doesn't have enough fire for me, and it pairs directly with another problem I've had with this, where this was pitched very much and is marketed very much as a romance series. So something's very focused on the love between Superman and Lois, very thing. And I was really kind of taken aback by, in the first episode alone, they're already immediately kind of head over heels in love with each other. And I think that's something that, it's certainly a choice, and going into episode 3, it's something that's got potential to improve for me. Like, if they take it in a direction that I'm seeing, it could work. But I'm not gonna lie, when I first watched it, I was like, oh, but did they have like no confidence in this, like, at all? Do they have to have them every 5 seconds blushing over each other? Like, it felt very safe. It felt very kind of like how a lot of modern cartoons handle relationship, where it's very dumbed down and very easy to take. And for someone who was looking forward to that aspect of the show particularly, that was a very big disappointment. There's other things here and there I can talk about with flaws, and we can get more into it because I don't want to just take up all the time. But what they look to be doing with their take on Krypton, I'm not a very big fan of. Maybe they can make it work. Maybe they can go because it's still been very vague about it so far. But at the moment, it looks a little too. They took the Dragon Ball influence maybe a touch too far on that aspect, and they maybe took a little bit of Invincible and things like that. And I'd rather Superman stick to its own strengths than trying to mimic the things that mimicked it. It seems like kind of like you're biting your own tail if you take the things that tried to copy Superman and change it, and then apply those back to Superman retroactively. It doesn't yield as good results. It just feels like you're kind of got imposter syndrome, that you're not confident in your own material. Clark as well is one that I was immediately a little bit more negative on, but he's got into a positive that I'll go over in like when we talk about more of the later episodes. But overall, my biggest takeaway from this show is it's a kid's show, and it's a good little kid's show, but I was hoping it would be a little bit more of that, and I have no idea why this is on at Adult Swim at midnight when this is not the target audience for that, and I think it's kind of setting itself up poorly because of it, because this is something that isn't that. This is definitely a through and through, it's meant to be a kid's show, and it does a good job at being that.
Okay. Yeah, I want to hop in and just say, like, immediately, I 100% agree with you on the villains. I really like Livewire. Livewire, I think, is kind of, after, like, writing her for her own stuff, I think Livewire is kind of an underrated villain in a lot of ways. She's mainly just kind of seen as, like, you know, one of those Tim fetish characters or whatever, but I legitimately like her, and I think she serves an interesting role in the Superman mythos with the way in which she was introduced in the animated series. And I think it's kind of interesting that we've gotten to a point where there's so much distance to that she doesn't really feel like an animated character anymore. She feels like she's just been part of the comics for as long as anyone can remember. So it is kind of funny to see the first villain in this new Superman series is a holdover original character from the previous animated Superman show. I found that kind of fascinating. I just wish it was, good. Like, making her generic, pseudo-military thief, paramilitary, whatever the fuck you call it, like mercenary kind of vibe, was just disappointing immediately, because it loses the like interesting role as the like 24-hour news cycle versus Superman that I think Livewire could be used to embody really well, or just, I guess, the media take. So you could do 24-hour news cycle, you could do like toxic social media, just the toxicity of that media personality as a Superman villain I think is really interesting, and you completely, it's just gone. It's 100% not there. It doesn't even have like an aspect of it. And, it was fine in episode 1 when you didn't get a name drop, but then when fucking anime boy Slade Wilson goes, Leslie Willis, shut it. I'm like, oh, no. And I'm like, okay, but at least we're going to get to see her fight. And then she's like, she's got tech to be Livewire. I'm like, oh no. But I'm like, oh, okay, it might work out because he fucked with the tech and now it's like mutating her. Okay, yeah, I'm on board with that. So this is just like proto Livewire. Then we're gonna get the real Livewire. And then Alfie, they defeated her and captured and tortured her using electricity.
Dude,
I just don't know.
I had the exact same fucking like hope when the fucking her skin turned blue for a second. I was like, well, maybe. and then just no, we're sticking to the. And I don't want to segue immediately, but like, we've really kind of what tech-based supervillains being all the soldier, military-based in these franchises is what it was like in the 2000s where we made them all serial killers. Like, this is the new version of that. Just making these characters that are in no way related to any of these paramilitary or high-tech weaponry thing, and I think the biggest example of it is the Spider-Man video games and Insomniac. But it's been a very common trend even in the comics, and other cartoons like the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon that came out is very high on this as well. And I don't... It's such a modern trend that I think is immediately dating itself, and especially for like introducing a character like Superman and kind of trying to make an argument that his rogues gallery is one of the more underrated ones. With, like you said, like I agree, Livewire I think is kind of a hidden gem that hasn't really had something that could bring her to as good as she is, but the concept, the design, everything about her works. Doing a different take on that makes that as generic as possible definitely doesn't bring any goodwill. And I've seen leaks from character designs, not for episodes and stuff, but just character designs and previews for episode 4 that's coming out and stuff, and what happens in episode 3 is just, I don't know, it doesn't look like it's getting better. It's looking like that's the identity for the whole villains rogues for the series, and that's immediately a big kind of like, that takes you down a notch.
Yeah. But outside of the villains, the other complaint I will, I don't know if I agree with the complaint, or if I kind of see where you're coming from, and it did kind of throw me, was the romance thing. I did think it was like a little just too lovey-dovey right out the gate. I thought that was a little much, and again, the fact that they're like blushing at each other constantly. The comparison I saw someone bring up was She-Ra. The new Netflix She-Ra. It's a couple years old at this point. It's finished, but it's got a very similar vibe to that.
Production team.
But like I watched She-Ra though, and there just was not as much of it. You know, like they definitely like lean into it and do like the blushing and stuff, but like they really the main romance of Catra and Adora gets like dragged out, and it doesn't really get finalized until the end of the series. They aren't like batting eyes at each other constantly and just going for it right out the gate. They really do a slow burn on that, which you don't necessarily need to do with Clark and Lois, but it's just like I am kind of with Jimmy on this. Like, just fuck already. Like, Jesus Christ, if you're gonna be that like gung ho on it right away, that's a little just what's even the point of waiting for it, you know? Just go for it already. So I was a little not necessarily disappointed, but I was just like, it feels like a little much to go as hard with as they are right out the gate. I'm not really sure what the story's going to be here. There's the possibility that you might do the love triangle thing between Clark, Superman, and Lois. That he feels more comfortable around her as Superman, and so Lois is slowly falling in love with Superman and like losing interest in Clark. And that could maybe be interesting, but I don't know if they're gonna commit to that or not. But I don't know. It was an interesting thing. Positives to talk about. I really like how the show is not, despite its flaws, it doesn't have the flaws that a lot of other superhero media, particularly like MCU tropes, I guess you just call them at this point. They're not unique to the MCU, but they're just very on display there. So there's no like irony to this show, and I really appreciate that about it. Like when the example that a lot of people have brought up, and I really quite like, is when Clark comes out of the Kryptonian trance and he's got the Superman suit on and Martha sees it, her reaction is, it looks good, but it needs something. And then she just like makes the shorts and puts them on, and it's not like it's called attention to, but it's not like made fun of. It's not done quote unquote ironically or as a gag. She's just like, this is good, but it just needs something more, and then she puts it on, and that's like the
MCU
only
version of that.
Way
the
that
MCU version of that would be he gets the trunks in the original costume, she looks at it, makes a joke about them, and then he takes them off.
Or he has to wait until the end of the season to get the trunks and then make a
that'd be the
joke about
CW version of it, yeah.
And then season 2, he doesn't have them on anyway.
Exactly. It's just like that's such a good thing to just no, it just looks good, so we're just gonna do it, and that's the only explanation is it just looks better. And I really appreciated that about it. And there's just I think there's a lot of examples of that throughout the series or throughout the episodes so far. Is just no, it's just this is just genuine. It's not trying to be ironic. It's not trying to prove itself or like I don't know what's the word I want here. It's not trying to allow things to happen via irony. It's just being very genuine in its presentation.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That was a very, very refreshing thing to see, and it's something that immediately you get the moment you see like the production stills and like how Clark is drawn, like the intro credits. Is this is from the people who really like genuinely love the concept, which can make the flaws and some change decisions like stand out a little bit more. But it also when it highlights just a not compromising, like just being like, hey, Superman's kind of cool and awesome, and we're just gonna have him do Superman things and not tell you that he's cool and awesome, but just have him do it, and you'll probably laugh and giggle and like, oh, the Clark's such a fucking idiot, or oh, that was a sweet moment, or oh, that was a sweet line, and then just not draw, just move on to the next and just let that exist. It's proving like the best way to win the argument for like why is Superman relevant is just to do a fucking Superman and do it honestly and let people make up their own minds. And it's worked. Like people are really fucking on board with that, and that's the biggest praise I can give for the show. Is I think this show has single-handedly saved Superman's public image among the general audience. I don't know how far this has reached, but at least in like social media circles, people are on board again for like genuinely like liking Clark as like an individual and not just as a person to be corrupted or evil or what have you. And that's so refreshing.
Do you think they'll do an evil Superman in this show at some point, just to like do their take on the trope, or do you think they're gonna try to avoid that at all
Maybe,
costs?
but we'll get into this, and I want to let Steve talk for a little bit. But I think I'm gonna be really curious to see how this show handles any of the heavier subject matter because we haven't gotten there yet, and any like little teasers of it so far have been rather like superfluous and weak. So I'm not sure. I don't have an answer for that. I want to see how they handle someone who's like. If an actual villain shows up or some actual things happen, and just to see how it handles that, then I could give you a better answer on that.
Okay. Yeah, Steve, what were your general thoughts on this?
I really like it. I thought it was good. I am in agreement with the weak villains, but I do want to preface that a little bit and say I think it's unfair to say that they went for generic military weapons and it's just as bad as everything else does it with. I think it's actually a little smarter than that, because I think there is a take here of a Clark that's afraid of his origins, the conspiracy, aliens are real Jimmy Olsen, and the bad guys are proto-military government kinds of black ops people. I think there is actually some thought being put into the idea of like, this version of Superman is in a world where he is unsure of who he is enough that the scariest thing would be something like the deep dark government who wants to experiment on him. I don't think they've done a lot to make that super overt outside of the first two episodes, but I do think there is something there, so I don't want to just write it off as it's just MCU-izing turning everyone into proto-military. Like, this is nowhere near the same league as like turning Falcon into an Air Force dude, you know? Like, I think it's a little better than that. But they are still weak.
No. Like, let's call it what it is. This is nowhere near turning.
This is not turning Red Wing into a drone. I think it is a little smarter than I think you guys were giving it credit for. But I do agree that tech-based villains versus Superman is just kind of a boring concept on its own, even if they have a take with it. The kind of standout for me though is I really, really like their take on Clark and Superman. I think it's really visually original, and I think there is actually a lot of runway for him to grow and become something unique unto himself. I disagree with you, Alfie, a little bit in the sense that, like, I don't think there was a feedback loop in this show, taking inspiration from things that were inspired by Superman. I think, on the contrary, that's how these things learn to grow and change. Like, you look at something like Creed 3, right? And Creed 3 is a really good movie, but the big argument it makes is that if you want to evolve the Rocky franchise, you don't just make another sports genre movie with the same beats. You have to take that genre and supplant it somewhere else where the person making it has their own unique take. And in this case, they take the American sports drama and turn it into an anime sports drama, and they borrow those beats because Michael B. Jordan really loves that stuff. And I think the Superman show is doing the same thing, where there's a lot of anime influence because the people involved are also kind of anime nerds. And I think the visual cues they borrow from that are actually really refreshing to see in Superman. The big thing that I really liked in the first 2 episodes, even though he gets the heat vision later, is that his eyes glow blue. I feel like there was a conscious choice being made for, after a decade of Superman glowing evil red eyes, that they made a version of the character who, when he's in an emotionally distressed state and wants to show off his powers, his eyes instead go blue. I think that's a really cool thing, and I really like that it's the emotional trigger that allows him to be more super when the situation calls for it. And I also really like that he can't immediately communicate with Jor-El. I like the idea that, like, Jor-El, to him, looks as terrifying an alien as he physically could, and that they can't talk to each other. I think it kind of subverts a lot of the boring Krypton stuff by doing that and just immediately making it so that Clark has to come to a point where he's ready to learn about it, but doing that isn't as easy as just AI Jor-El tells him everything. So all of that stuff, I think, from the Superman side is really good. I will say I don't like Jack Quaid as Clark or Superman very much. He kind of has that weird effect where I feel like he's giving too much of an impression and not enough of his own voice. His Clark's not as bad, but I really don't like the way he talks as Superman yet. I like Jimmy fine. I kind of want him to see him do more. I kind of want him to tie into that thematic stuff more later. I actually really like Lois. I like that she's just kind of insane. I like that she just, like, flat out lies and apologizes it for later. I like that her rivals in the Daily Planet bullpen are just the reporter Genu force. That's so fucking funny to me. I really, really like all that stuff. I think it's a solid show. I think it's a good kid show. I think a lot of the cutesy stuff is cutesy stuff you'd see in things like Steven Universe, you know, or Adventure Time, especially when it started getting more of an ongoing story. So I think this is good. It doesn't, like, blow my mind or anything, but I'm also just not the target audience for this, like 11-year-olds are at most.
Mm-hmm. And that was the big realization I had, is I was very excited for it because when people were saying anime Superman, I was like, oh fuck, they're talking to me. Like, this is everything I've ever wanted, ever asked for it. And then watching it is like, oh no, they're not talking to me. They're talking to the generation that's younger than me. They're not talking to Naruto fans. They're talking to My Hero Academia fans. They're talking to people younger than that even. And I think that's really good that exists. It just, I had a little bit of like I had to kind of accept to treat it on those terms. I had to accept, like, okay, I can't get mad at this choice because this isn't what I would do, because I should do that choice. And even though they have similar inspirations from me, they're not trying to do what I want to do, so I can't blame them for not wanting to do that. And that was kind of like the conclusion I came to. And why I'm in a more understanding place with the show, I just kind of had to process my initial disappointment of being like, okay, I thought this was going to be aimed at me and it's not, and that's okay. Like, it's just learning that is kind of like, oh man, that's kind of a bummer, but also at the end of the day, it's, you know, it's good that it exists and I can still get enjoyment from it. Just, I wanted to really be like, this was the most hype thing I had going for it. Like, oh my god, they finally get it from me. And it's like, oh, it's for this. It's a different kind of vibe. It's a different kind of thing. That being said, to go to some of your points, Steve, I really love the AI Jor-El stuff in this as well. I think it's so cool that he doesn't understand him. I think that's genius. I think that's something that could be really impactful as well if they ever bring in Zod or Kara into the show, is have that be the first time someone can translate for him, especially if it was Zod, because Zod could lie, and I think that's really powerful, and you can do a lot of interesting stuff with that. The other, and I
was it New 52 when they did Zod for the first time, they had him like, "You don't understand what any of this technology is, Clark." Was that New
I
52
think that was
Zod?
Earth One Zod.
Was it? Okay.
It was that
Like
time
I just
period.
remember
It was that
specifically
time
like
period.
yeah, with like these containers aren't jail cells. They're made for storing grain. I could have walked out of here anytime I felt like it. I'm like, that's so fucking good though.
I think we are confirmed to get Supergirl, so I feel like that'll probably be their out for that. But we're also getting Brainiac in this show, and I imagine that'll be part of it too.
Can't wait for proto-military Brainiac. It's gonna be
I
great.
won't spoil it, but the Brainiac take is kind of my one remaining. Brainiac is my one remaining hope for like, okay, it sounds like you can't do this uwuified. I want to see you do a little bit more of a serious take with this one. We'll see. We'll see how that goes though. But the Brainiac take is something that I'm like, okay, that's a different take, and I can't see how you make like a cutesy version of that. Like it's just a hard fucking premise. Like you have to kind of treat it as is. But just going again back to some of Steve's points. But yeah, like the anime influence for a lot of this, the fact that we have a fucking Sailor Moon animation sequence.
Magical
Yeah,
Girl
that's
transformation.
That's fantastic. I love that. A lot of people were shitting on this. I kind of fuck with the lightning. I kind of like the lightning, like him just. I've been very pro, because obviously Dragon Ball, I'm very pro Superman should have an aura. I've always wanted it to be just like a yellow, kind of fiery, like it looks like he's glowing like the sun aura. But the lightning is, again, it's closer to something from that, and I think it's cool because the problem with Superman is when you're just dealing with his basic visual appeal, because everyone else that came after him kind of took his power set as like the baseline and then added shit to it, because like, oh well, everyone is a flying brick, everyone has fly and all these kind of things. To make Superman stand out again and be as striking as he was when he picked up that car in 1938, and you hadn't seen anything like that before, you do kind of have to either lean into more of his esoteric powers or lean into the scale of his powers. Like, oh yeah, other characters can lift stuff, but no one can lift as much as Superman, or other kind of things. This taking direction of like, okay, Superman has all of these like flying brick powers, but we're gonna treat them in a much more kind of sci-fi anime power up, like explosive way. I think that's really, really cool. And I think how this show animates Superman powers have been really interesting so far. I love how they did the heat vision. I think that looks sick. I love that it was like sketchy and like didn't quite line up properly, and like it was like a different filter. I love how he flies. It's just a trail of color of like red, blue, and yellow. And when we move really fast, we have that like time slowing sequence where he gets beat up by these kind of awful looking CGI robots. But then once he's actually like activates his Superman Super Saiyan mode, he takes him out in one shot. Like I think that's a cool idea to getting people on board with the idea that Superman doesn't have to be generic. You can add flavor to it. You can add spice. He's still doing Superman things. He's still got Superman, but we're adding new things to it. The thing I'm really interested in is, so far this version of Clark doesn't have any of his like extra powers, and we've had little hints here and there of like X-ray vision, like little coming through a little bit, superhero maybe coming through a little bit, but like all the things that aren't physical haven't come to him like fully yet. He hasn't got like a mastery of those yet. So I'm really interested if that's something that changes his perspective from being more of a I'm here to help the world and just the city thing, to maybe being more of a global figure once his superhero like fully kicks in. He's like, oh god, I can hear this everywhere. Like, I think, again, this might be just projecting of like, this is how you can make it a little bit more angsty and like introspective, but like, which again is just, again, maybe not the target audience, but fuck it, like the example you gave, Steve, of like Steven Universe handled like shit like that all the time as well, so it's not unheard of. But the idea that maybe we'd have the love triangle of Superman and Lois, and we'd start out with things seeming very easy and simple to understand just as the baseline, and then as things develop they get more complicated. I've seen suggestions from people that Lois, once she does get her job at the Daily Planet, delves a little deeper more into that and goes a little bit more distance. It gets a little bit more fire, gets a little bit bitchier. Like, that kind of aspect of Lois would then come out from that. Clark would enhance the difference between Superman and Clark once he's trying to hide his identity a little bit more, because so far he's kind of like really fucking winging it, aside from like a little bit of a voice change, which I thought was really funny. Stuff like that might be things that come over time, so you don't want to be too jump the gun and say, this is how it's going to be forever and all the way. But at the same time, I think we've got enough of a sampler to get a gauge of like, all right, this is kind of what this show's going to be like, because this is their pitch, this is what they're going for.
Yeah. All right, so I want to throw my hat in the ring here for the thing that, like, I think you guys have mostly liked, and I've been like, no thanks, on, is the very, very anime-influenced series. And I'm not going to say I don't like it because it's anime and, like, Western animation is better than that or anything. It just feels to me so, like, incredibly derivative. And to me it feels to a degree like someone trying to blend in. I kind of get that Steve Buscemi, how do you do fellow kids vibe from it. It just doesn't feel as... It feels like very self-conscious and like trying to overstep itself to sell itself as cool and hip, whereas for me it just kind of felt like, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm just too used to the Tim influence in superhero media from DC and I mean from Western or from Marvel stuff too, to a degree. Maybe I just feel like too connected to that, and like that's just too burned into my brain of what DC characters in animation are supposed to be. So this could just be me, but at the same time I've really been like wanting to see something different that's not in that Tim DCAU style. And I don't know, I guess just this isn't it for me. I was not much of a fan of this like very, very anime inspired thing. It was like one thing with like Clark and Lois and another thing with like the action, but like I think the one that like actively made me cringe and was like, no, I actually hate this, was the Steve Lombard and the Cat Grant bit. That one was a bridge too far for me.
Interesting.
I think
I'm surprised
for me,
about that. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, I think for me, part of the thing was, because I agree with you. I am sick of Bruce Timm. I mentioned the other day on Twitter, which is always a mistake, but I mentioned on Twitter the other day that my hottest take about the DC animated universe is that none of it's very good. So I want to stay as far away from that shit as possible. If Bruce Timm ever writes Batman again, it's going to be too fucking soon, and I fucking hate it. So I really do want to shed the skin from that. And when I saw this and I saw the anime influence, my big takeaway was, okay, finally Superman's not for your dad. It definitely kind of had this vibe of like, you are finally taking the shell of something that is appropriate for the present culture and putting Superman into it and allowing him to move forward in that direction. You don't have to do the Justice League action level of, it's a good show, but like it's a kid show. It's a very, very, very kid show. You don't have to do the sort of stilted, overly serious, can't even lip sync because you have no budget Young Justice animation, where it's like aimed at adults, but it's not even really aimed at adults. It's aimed at 20-somethings that think they're adults. And so like there's all this tension.
Says the 20
it's this thing with DC animation that feels like it's always got this stick up its ass, where it feels like it needs to prove that it's cool and it's edgy, and it never is. Every one of the animated movies has this to a degree, and I feel like this is the first time they finally like shed that skin off and said, okay, no, we don't have to be edgy. We don't have to be your dad's Superman. We don't have to pretend like we're aiming for a 13-year-old audience or anything. Instead, let's just do Superman by way of what kids today like to watch. And I feel like this is very much in line with, and this is part of the problem of it being on Adult Swim, but this is very much in line with anything else you can watch on Cartoon Network today. And I think that is hugely necessary, to Alfie's point of making a generation of people actually give a shit about Superman again, especially when the last cultural touchstone for him in a solo series was Superman the Animated Series, where he just had a big stick up his ass the entire time. So I like the anime influence, not because it's done the most amazing in the world or anything. Like, I would prefer it to be a bit more shonen, but because it feels like a thing that is of today's culture and not a throwback aimed at people older than the target audience.
I mean, that's fair. Again, for me, it's just the fact that it felt very... I guess it felt like it just lacked its own identity. Like, say what you will about, DCAU stuff. There is plenty. But it did, especially at the time when it came out, feel very simultaneously unique and like it had kind of always been there. And I think that was a stroke of genius on its part. And again, not to praise it too much, but like there was something unique and there's a power to that. Whereas this feels very much like it's trying to be a bunch of other stuff, and that kind of makes it feel less than, at least in my opinion.
I'm kind of in the middle because I didn't have it as a problem of it taking itself out, and I actually think this is a quite unique art style and identity for it. My main issue is I don't think it goes far enough. And I think a lot of the choices, a lot of the time, feel very kind of how to draw anime like type vibe. Like, it feels like when you go to like a bookstore and you see or even in the first Spider-Verse, Penny Parker kind of had that vibe where it's like, look, we're doing an anime, but you're like saying that you're doing an anime, so it just feels kind of like, no, dude, stop. Come on, man. Like, you kind of just... It feels like, to your point, Steve was saying, like, this is finally Superman is it for your dad. Sometimes it felt like your uncle who, like, knows you like Dragon Ball. So it's like, do you like Yu-Gi-Oh? And it's like, come on, yeah, please.
Yes, I do. Say more.
Yeah, right. But like, it's like, but they think Goku's name is Yu-Gi-Oh. You know,
Yeah.
like it's.
It's not?
Pretty much, right? Like,
Yu-Gi-Oh!
It just gives you, like... Exactly, right? It just gives you that vibe of, like, you want to kind of move your hand over your eye, like, oh, man, maybe you shouldn't have done this. So that's my thing with it, is I thought the Steve Lombard thing and the Cat Graham thing was, like, a good balance of it. I think some issue I have with it is I think some of the designs, again, for, like, the villains go very... generic, very like how to draw anime type vibe. They don't feel like it. Like, if you do anime Livewire, you think that would be the hardest fucking like coolest take on her in the world, and it's just not that. And I feel like that's the big thing it's missing for me now, is it wants to do that, but it's not going hard enough. And maybe to Ian's point, that would give it more of that identity if they went more in that direction of just fully accept this as a shonen anime Superman and just go hard with it. Don't try and do this weird middle ground where we're also heavy highlighting that we're a Western animation studio as well, and we're dealing in that. It's like, just do it. Just lean full force into it. Don't do this kind of weird middle ground, because that's what kind of makes me more confused. Of like, well, why are you making these choices then? If you're saying you have an anime influence, like, that's like a weird disconnect.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where I was like, I'm probably gonna catch some flack for this, but it is interesting to see that we're all like, I think it's fair to say none of us are like in love with the anime style influence take. We all think that there's like ways that it could be done better. We're just kind of in different spots of where we think the improvement needs to be. So that's
Definitely.
kind of interesting.
And I think those improvements, if any one of those things happened, even if it wasn't the thing we imagined, we'd probably all get like, okay, this feels more solid.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of, in all fairness, that is kind of what you expect with your early season shows. Um, even even fucking DCAU stuff, like there's a pretty wild difference between like season one of BTAS and the later seasons and where the DCAU eventually got. Like I can watch late DCAU, early DCAU is garbage. It's such a like particular vibe. Like even Superman the animated series in particular, those first couple episodes are okay, and then they kind of go up and down in quality throughout season one, but then season two on it picks up quite a bit. Um, so I don't know. It's an interesting little thought pattern. One thing I am, again, this kind of goes back to the genuineness of it, is I really like that this is not trying to be Batman dressed up like Superman, like a lot of DC projects are. That was the joke about Arrow that I had for the longest fucking time was, oh, we're gonna do a series about a vigilante human with just like these incredible martial arts skills, and he's in a city and fighting crime. Oh, you're doing a Batman show? No, it's Green Arrow. But don't worry, we're gonna do a spin-off show of that. Oh, that's gonna be Batman? No, we're gonna do the Flash. It's just like all these shows just have felt, and the Flash is like taking as many notes. Like, what's the fucking the meme? Hey, can I copy your homework? Yeah, just don't make it look too obvious. And just fucking like put Morgan Freeman and Cisco up on screen for the way the Flash television series did stuff. So it's nice that this is just so embracing being just about Superman and not trying to like set up a whole universe outside of Metropolis and everything that's going on there. It's not trying to make Superman feel more like Batman or something like that. It is, despite the way that some of the elements of the take don't land for me, it is genuinely a Superman take through and through. It's not trying to make him into a different character that he doesn't fit the mold for. So I really appreciate that.
I also feel like it's a Superman take that is very aware of the stuff that people have been complaining about in a way that doesn't feel immediately reactionary, where you could very easily do like the sort of irony-laden style of every choice you make is in reaction to a choice other people just not like. And so like it becomes like this reverse engineered thing where you focus test it to death and it doesn't come off as authentic even though it's trying to. And that's something that happens a lot, particularly with franchises like this. And I feel like this show does a very good job of giving us the antithesis to what people did not like about the Snyderverse without kind of rubbing your nose in it. I mentioned earlier the blue eye thing I felt like was a very intentional choice. But the other thing I really, really loved about episode 2 was immediately after he beat Livewire, he like fixed up the city. And that was such a cute, neat little touch where like he's concerned about that stuff and it's part of the character of the show. And I also just really like that so much of what he's trying to do in blending Superman and Clark in the third episode is that it is trying to like come up with a reason why these two are separate things, or like what exactly Superman's approach is in trying to fight the bad guys, because it's not just beat them up really quick. Like there is a level of like he's trying to communicate with them. He's trying to curve collateral damage. He's still kind of afraid of his powers to an extent. And it's almost kind of got that quasi Spider-Man 2 thing where like his powers are dictated by like how he feels that day. So like one would assume that like as he becomes more sure of his Kryptonian identity, the more of those powers will shine through. And it's not so much going to be a thing of like each one of those powers is treated like Smallville style. At least I hope it's not. Where like, in this episode he gets super hearing, and in this episode he gets ice breath, and in this episode, like it just continues on and on and on and on like that. I do kind of like more the approach of like the emotional connection to what he is doing is what's dictating the powers, and that feels like a very counterintuitive choice compared to what Superman's been doing lately, whether you're talking about movies or comics. And I do really like that. Like, Superman in the comics right now is in this weird sort of like black hole of continuity where if you just kind of haven't kept up with what's been going on since Rebirth, you're like lost as fuck. And even when you start with like the new #1 with Joshua Williamson, there is still this whole thing of like, wait, why the fuck is Lex Luthor talking in his head and shit? And then compare that to like whatever the hell Henry Cavill's Superman's been doing for 10 years in the Snyderverse, and you finally like meet in the middle ground. You're like, oh, this is just a Superman take. This is like actively not trying to be any of those things, and it's just is having fun with itself, and that feels very refreshing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I just wish certain aspects were tuned up. For like the supporting cast, for example, like we haven't talked about them that much, but I love their take on Jimmy. I think their Jimmy take is fantastic. They just need to give him some fucking dresses now and like start like just and just no context, just turns up with him one day and just like, oh yeah, that's just Jimmy. Like let's just lean all. You want to talk about like a modern take for Superman? That's just like staring them right in the face. And the right wing of Twitter already hates this show, so like please just really send them up in arms with that. It'd be fucking hilarious.
I really like how NerdSync did a video and the thumbnails like they ruined him, and it's a picture of Jimmy Olsen, and the whole take is, how the fuck does he not know how to work a camera? This is bullshit. That's his fucking job. No, genuinely, I like the show. Just negativity does a lot better on click-through rates. I'm like, good for you, Scott. You deserve that. You're photographing during the day. How do you not know what your f-stop is? That would really got me.
The other thing on that was like again the supporting cast, but for me the thing is. The big weak link of that point is the Kents as well are kind of just there in this show. Everyone knows my takes. I don't like them both being alive in general, but even then, the scene with him and Martha, like the little flashbacks and stuff, just felt very like, all right, let's get through this part. Like the trunk scene was cute, but that's about it. Everything else felt very like, all right. We don't really have a take for this, so we're just going to try and get through this as fast as possible, which is interesting because normally a lot of writers are more interested in the Earth side of stuff for Superman and the Krypton. The creative team here seems to be kind of itching to get to Krypton stuff. When we then go from that to Lois as the other main weak link for me is she has glimmers here and there for me where it works, where I can buy this as young intern Lois Lane that can't cash her checks yet, doesn't have the clout yet to make the choices that Lois Lane wants to make, but then she'll just immediately, like in the first episode when she tries to fuck over Jimmy and Clark and then immediately does like this really over-the-top apology, and then again every episode has like a scene where she hugs him and like apologizes for something she did. I'm just like, it just feels like you're taking the teeth out of Lois Lane. Like it's I can understand wanting to do a more, this Lois Lane isn't high on cigarettes and coffee, she's high on sugar. Like we're going more bouncy, we're going like more young and kind of in that friend and trendier and sportier. I can roll with that, but I think you really do lose something when you kind of sand out her edges, while still trying to get like every 20 minutes of drama we're going to have some kind of disagreement with her and Clark that's then resolved in the same thing. And that's like a basic of formulaic like episodic TV, and that can work. But I think this is something where, to the DCAU comparison, I think this is something where the animated series absolutely shat on this one with that. And you can't just do that again, but for what they're trying to do, it just hasn't clicked for me yet. And I want to see, there's ways they can do it to make it, but I think Lois Lane as a character is someone that should always have that bite to her. I think that's what makes her interesting, that of all people, she's the one Superman falls in love with. I think at the moment, this is a little too easy.
I disagree in the sense that I have the reverse issue you do, where I don't really like Jimmy, but I really like Lois. And it's not because the Jimmy take is bad. I just feel like the Jimmy take's not doing anything, where he's Clark's roommates, and he's in the UFOs, and that's the take. But he's not in any way sort of participating in the trinity of the main characters. Clark and Lois each episode, we can talk about it being formulaic, sure, but they have a back and forth with each other. And Jimmy kind of doesn't. He hasn't really done anything in 3 episodes aside from be there next to the other two. And I'm kind of waiting for that part of the show to kind of click and say, okay, what exactly is it about this version of Jimmy Olsen that not only wants to be here, but pulls the other two in a specific direction that he wants to explore, as opposed to the other two who do that on their own. I really like the Lois take because I like that she is the motivator for getting into the plot of every episode. And I like that her and Clark do clash in each episode. I like that Clark is always surprised by like just how kind of psychotic she is, where she'll just steal the other reporters' badges, and she's like, yeah, we'll just pretend to be them. This is totally normal and fine to do. I like in the second episode where like when Superman's fighting the robots, and her instant thought is like, oh, she saw someone press the button to turn them off, so she's just gonna go and do that, no questions asked. I do think she has teeth. I do think that she has a conflict there. Now, should they maybe work on getting that conflict to not resolve at the end of a 20-minute episode every episode? Sure. But I also kind of feel like that's just the demographic for this show. It's yet to really indicate anything aside from anime fuckboy Slade Wilson, the carryover between episodes. And I love anime fuckboy Slade Wilson. I will die on that hill. That man is beautiful. He's so great. I love that his hair is why he's got one eye missing. It's so cute. Anyway, it's fantastic. No, anyway, I think there can be.
I just could feel Alfie
I love him
no. So like, first of all, let Steven finish his point first.
Okay, so real quick, I'll just finish here then. I like that there is a take between Clark and Lois, and I like that the take is the driver of the story of each episode. That this is a show about Lois and Clark's relationship and their romance, and they're kind of cutesy with each other, but you are creating the chemistry between them by having situations where Lois is intentionally the instigator and Clark has a decidedly opposite reaction, and then they come together at the end. That is building chemistry. Whether or not that take works for someone else, that's a different point, but I think there is something there. Versus Jimmy, who's just kind of hanging out. I want to see a Jimmy-focused episode. More than that, I just want to see a moment in any of these episodes where it feels like Jimmy has something to say about any of it, because right now he kind of hasn't done anything. It felt like he's got like 3 lines over the course of 3 episodes, really.
And they're all about like conspiracy theory
and like
jokes.
Not literally 3 lines, but like there is a level of just like I get the joke of what Jimmy's take is. I want that take to drive the story, or at least contribute to the push of the story in some direction.
Right, I'm down for a Jimmy episode 2 and like getting more meat on the bone for that. I guess my thing is for why that works for me is it's been such a long time since we've had a Jimmy Olsen in anything that's like legitimately entertaining and kind of out there. Like it's always very like generic cowboy reporter, golly gee, Mr. Kent. Like he's never had a Jimmy who like has a kind of cool vibe about them, has some confidence, has their own thoughts and feelings. So I just really like that for Jimmy, that this Jimmy seems to be out of the entire group the one who's the most together, the one who's the most like, yeah, I'm pretty confident with myself, I know where I'm going with things, here's what I like, and I just will be unabashedly that. And I think that's something you can really, just that foundation is, again, it's early days. If it just stays just that, I'll agree with you, Steve. I think it'll be very shallow, but I think out of the ones that just, you show me one scene out of it, the debut scene, I was like, oh, I like this Jimmy. Like, it immediately just kind of clicked for me, just because it felt like they get the premise that Jimmy Olsen's meant to be kind of cool. Like, Jimmy Olsen's meant to be kind of fun to hang around with. It's not just meant to be someone who's to be looked at as, like, someone to care for and, like, thing. And I think the episode 3, when, like, they're with maybe even two, actually. I forget which one it was, but the one where like Lois is trying to like advocate for her way above Jimmy's, and Jimmy's the one who's like pushing for it, and then it works at the end. I think that was a better example of what they've been trying to do with Clark, where you introduce a conflict and have it resolve, and it tells us something about the characters. Like that made me buy Lois and Jimmy's friendship more than they've made me buy Lois and Clark's love for each other so far. Like I think that was a more natural and easier way to do it. To answer the burning question, anime boy Slade Wilson, like inherently, yes. Did I fucking scream to the heavens and beg for death when the end of episode 2 was here's Task Force X, here's Amanda Waller and the Suicide Squad? Yes, I did. I prayed for death. I won't acknowledge that. I won't like say I'll move on from that. The Suicide Squad is my most hated franchise in the world. It has dethroned Harry Potter. I want that shit out of my media instantly. Fuck the Suicide Squad.
I don't understand why. I'm so confused.
You made me read Craven's Last Hunt. I'm gonna make you read Ostrander Suicide Squad and make you change your mind.
Look, man, I just can't. I just do not give a fuck about these quirky military bitches. If I have to see one more fucking thing with Harley Quinn going on a mission with other fucking nobodies that die, I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna actively lose that.
I will grant you this, right? The one thing in the universe less interesting than Batman versus Deathstroke is Superman versus Deathstroke. Like, there is, objectively, you cannot sink lower than that. So the idea that Slade shows up is, on paper, the dumbest thing any human being could have ever said should belong in a Superman show. However, he's an anime fuckboy, and I love him.
Yeah, so that was my other point, is the fact that he's an anime fuckboy, and Deathstroke fans are losing their mind over that.
Yes!
I fucking love it. It's so funny.
I love it.
Please give him the fucking, like, Sasuke fucking, like, anime bullshit, my rival, like, fucking, please lead into that as hard as possible. Make him the Kylo Ren of this fucking show. Just please make him pathetic and whiny and bad at his job and, like, have a coiffed hair and then reveal that he's gay and have him date Jimmy or something. Just piss off as many Deathstroke fans as possible and I'll be here for it. So, like, that alone made me like, all right, I'll take this because this is so fucking out of left field. It's fucking hilarious.
I love it so much, man. That design should get imported to the comics. Fuck the white hair, goatee, and eye patch. This is it.
So funny.
We peaked right here. This is the fuck off Teen Titans. This is the best Deathstroke ever.
I don't know. You know how long it took me to realize that it was Slade? Like, I've got to, like, just come clean on this one. I had to have someone tell me. Like, I did not realize until someone, like, actually pointed out that Slade Wilson's an anime fuckboy. I'm like, oh my god, that's Slade!
I didn't realize that was Slade until the credits rolled and they said Slade was in the episode. I'm like, wait, what the fuck? What do you mean Slade was in this episode? And then I had to go back and figure it out.
Yeah, it was Twitter that told me as well. I think it's just such a different. No one alive could fucking call that. Just like there's no way and then they did, and fuck it, we will.
Here for it, 110% here for it. Anime fuckboy Slade forever.
Yeah. Oh, the one thing I really, really enjoyed, which is funny because I actually don't like this in the comics very often, but it was just such like a. I saw them come up on screen and I was like, no fucking way, they're doing it. And sure enough, the little girl was like, we're the Newsboy Legion, or News Kid Legion, whatever they said. I was like, yes, let's go. I couldn't believe they fit it in. It's like, we want to distribute our own newspaper. Like, lady, you are talking to an intern that shouldn't even be doing news right now. You think she's going to influence Perry White? You're such a cute kid. That was super cute. That was super
I like how much of this is just like to mention the earlier point, just pulling straight from just fun Superman things we haven't seen before. Like you said, like there's a Jimmy take who's competent. You've got the News Kids. You've got a Perry White. You've got Cat Grant and Steve Lombard, and they feel like Cat Grant and Steve Lombard. Like there's a lot of things here that just sort of tick the boxes of. This kind of feels like the first time we've just done a Superman thing in a long time. Alfie and I talk back and forth about the Superman comics and how they've evolved. And I like the Bendis run. I like most of the PKJ stuff, and I like the Joshua Williams stuff, but like it's really been a long time since the Superman comics have just kind of felt like a Superman comic. Like they've been so mired in continuity for so long that it's kind of exhausting to get through. So seeing this, and it's just kind of the highlight reel, and it's just kind of in a level kind of safe, but safe in a way that I think the property kind of needs it right now. I did enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with you there. I'm pretty happy with a lot of the choices and stuff they're making here.
For me again, it's a show for children, and judging it on those merits, I think it does its job decently enough. I think it's a solid show. I probably do like this more than Superman the Animated Series if it keeps up the thing, if it continues to improve and get better. I think I'll say that a lot more confidently. But this is still not one of my favorite superhero cartoons or anything like that. And judging it as someone who wanted, like, really desperately, like, this new Superman take is a little bit more negative, but I'm really glad for the positive response it's had for the character, and I think this is a really necessary thing, and I'm really rooting for the show to continue to grow and kind of iron out the ledges, because every problem I've said with it is something that can easily be addressed, and some of them as well are just personal taste things and are like objective. I think the only big major objective one that everyone universally is kind of behind is the villains, and that's such an easy fix to do, even just down the line with the villains you've got already. Like Ian said, they had an opportunity to fix Livewire in the episode.
Well, it looks like they're trying, like, Livewire, it's like, it feels like she's being set up for more, right? Because they go through, you see her, like, mutate, you see, like, even when they're torturing her, her skin's, like, changing colors, and I'm like, okay. But then this fact that they're torturing her with electricity, and I'm just like, no, come on, get the fuck out of here. What are you doing? This doesn't make any sense. I'm mad and I want my money back. Ian, you didn't pay for it. I still, like, you should pay me for having made me this angry. I demand restitution.
I should pay you the $15 for my HBO Max.
Yes.
That's how this is gonna work.
Yes, exactly. That was one thing. Just because you guys have been mentioning it a couple times, I keep meaning to bring it up. So, this is a show for kids. This is a show for kids. I watched this, at least episode 3, with my child. Leah does pretty good with cartoons and experiencing relatively new things. And actually, she does quite like Superman. So I was like, oh, you want to watch Superman? And she goes, yeah. So I put on episode 3, which is the episode I know the least about. And you'll find out why here in a second. And it starts and gets through the intro, and she goes, "Where's Crypto?" So immediate disappointment on that one.
You're raising her right. She's asking the real fucking questions.
Beautiful.
So immediately, "Where's Crypto?" So I was like, no, he's not in the show, at least not yet. So there's that problem, and then she did okay for a majority of it, but it was a little too much of a slow burn for her. And we were like, it was like the last big fight. She doesn't like action a ton. It was the last big fight, and she's like, I want to go downstairs. I want to eat breakfast. I'm like, the episode's almost over. We're just going to finish this episode. I don't like this.
I am curious, like, how this actually plays for kids, or even just like the target audience in general, because I really don't think the Twitterverse or the internet reaction to a thing is anywhere close to indicative of like what actual people think and whether or not it's making any kind of difference. And I don't imagine we're going to get any sort of like data on this, because it's airing on Adult Swim and then it's being watched the next morning on HBO Max. And the people that are letting their kids watch it, I imagine, are not letting them stay up until midnight to watch it on Adult Swim. So they're going to watch it
It airs at
midnight on Adult Swim. It's insane.
That's
ridiculous. It's insane that it does that as number one, but then number two, if you're an adult and you let your kid watch this, you have to consciously let them use HBO Max for it, and HBO Max isn't going to give you viewership numbers of what it's doing. So, like, I'm really, like, everything about the show is kind of stacked up for it to fail, because you need an adult with HBO Max to watch it. You have set it up in this situation where it's aimed for a demographic that would not themselves be able to purchase or watch HBO Max, and the demographic who has the ability to watch it on air has to stay up until midnight to do so, which they're not going to. So, like, it's one of those weird sort of things where, like, if you knew that going in, you probably would have made it as a show aimed more for, like, 13 and up teenagers, right? But instead, it seems like it should just be something that airs at 5 o'clock on Cartoon Network when kids come home from school, and they can just turn on the TV and watch it. So, like, without that audience, I don't know how well it does going forward.
Yeah, could be a problem.
I'm really kind of baffled by those choices. Like, they don't make any sense to me. It seems like it's just a sacrifice they made to get it out at all because of all the drama behind the scenes. Like, they have a second season already in production. They're already putting work on season 2. If it gets past 2 seasons, is going to be the real question.
Yeah.
And to Ian's point earlier about the anime influence, Toonami is still somehow a thing, and they still have an anime programming block on Saturday nights, and so, like, this coincides with that, or it's supposed to be on Toonami as well. And Toonami was a really big thing for, like, getting people my age into anime, because you'd come home and you'd turn on Toonami, because it used to be on every single day after school, and you'd watch, like, Dragon Ball Z, and you'd watch Gundam, and you'd watch Sailor Moon and shit like that. And you'd, in the same lineup as that, you'd watch stuff like Batman and Superman, the animated series. When Toonami shifted and went off the air for a while, and then eventually became, like, a Saturday night programming block, you got to watch, like, more adult-oriented anime, like stuff like Big O and Yu Yu Hakusho and Inuyasha and all that. And so, like, putting it in the same conversation as anime via Toonami is good. I don't think that would have been a mistake. But putting it in that block with other programming that is clearly geared towards a much different audience seems like a massive mistake. Because if you're gonna let a kid watch Toonami at 12 o'clock at night and watch Demon Slayer, then the Demon Slayer kid is not liking this. But at the same time, the kids who do like this at, like, 5 p.m. after school don't like Demon Slayer. So, like, where is the thought process here in terms of, like, how do you get these shows to cross-promote? Cartoon Network is actually amazing at cross-promotion because they're really good about having animated commercials and advertisements that use all of their characters from their different shows, and they create programming blocks where one show leads into the other kind of naturally, and they all have, like, similar art styles, similar subject matters, etc. So, like, fitting this into a block that would have something like Adventure Time before it or after it would have done it a lot of good, and the idea that it's being put next to, like, fucking Demon Slayer makes absolutely no sense and is not going to help.
Yeah, I completely agree, Steve. It's a really strange choice.
Yeah, I just don't get it.
I don't know. I've just seen the Twitter sphere react to it, and I'm seeing mostly positive things. Actually, you know, funny enough, I don't think I've seen anything like any outright negative reactions. I know they exist, but they just have not populated for me, so I'm quite grateful about that. So, yeah, you're right, though, Steve. The Twitter sphere is not a very meaningful place for what the actual reaction and, like, the financial numbers are for something like this. So, I don't know. Here's hoping the viewership's high enough. Here's hoping that it's able to get past its, you know, growing pains and hopefully become the best version of what it can be. And if not, at least it's a, you know, Superman show that's genuinely Superman and not trying to be anything else. So I'm happy for that, at least, even if it doesn't last a fucking billion seasons. I mean, even Superman the Animated Series in and of itself, that's only, what, 2-3 seasons? Does it get a third season?
I think it's
can't
only
remember
2.
if it gets to a third season. Yeah. If it is, I think like season 3 is extra short or something.
Even if it is only 2, it's a lot of episodes. Like it's like one of those things like where Batman the Animated Series, like season 1 of that is like 65 episodes. So we don't do that anymore.
Yeah. I don't know, but here's hoping it's able to outlive its growing pains and hopefully just do some good stuff. And, you know, even if it doesn't last forever, maybe it'll just be a nice little thing to have. I would like Superman and other DC particular properties in general to be able to fail gracefully, to try something and have it not work out, but not be seen as this, you know, absolute disgrace and embarrassment to the brand, and it means we can't do anything with it for like 10 years or whatever. I would like, you know, oh, well, we're going to try a Superman show, we're going to try a Wonder Woman thing, and if they don't succeed, they don't succeed, but they can stand well enough on their own, and it doesn't mean that the character is doomed to just live in Batman's shadow forever, because beginning to see the strain of Batman being tied to every fucking thing under the sun that DC puts out, and it's making people fucking sick of Batman for one, and it's just, you know, showing that the character is not really meant to sustain this whole fucking ship, and that someone else needs to come in and help, you know? But there's that comic panel, the really famous one all the power scalers like, of Superman, Wonder Woman, and is it Martian Manhunter pulling the Earth? And I just want to like fucking Photoshop that, just make it Batman, and Batman, and then fucking put all of DC the fucking background, because that's what it's felt like the last couple of years.
You might never get all of Kyle Rayner reprinted. You might never get a Wonder Woman animated series. And you might never get another Green Arrow comic. But you know what you will get? 800 Batman comics, baby.
Ooh, really, when you think about it, they're the same thing. I mean, it's all DC, right?
I do feel like DC's on, at least on a certain level, I think that they, in animation, have been more open to experiment than Marvel ever has. And I don't expect them to like,
except with the exception of hiring.
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, aside from like putting Bruce Timm's name on everything, DC has been very good about like, even if it doesn't work, they'll just keep pumping shit out for animation purposes. So like we have a pretty extensive library now of DC projects that are done anime style. We've got Gotham Knights, we've got Catwoman Hunted, we've got Batman Ninja, we've got this Superman, My Adventures of Superman. We've got the new Suicide Squad Izaki thing. So like, even if this doesn't go past 2 seasons, DC seems more than comfortable with just like in a couple of years they'll just do something else like this. Their entire animated movie line just had declining sale after declining sale, and then they still created a whole animated universe post New 52, and then no one watched any of them, and then they just did it again and created another new animated universe that no one is watching. So like, it doesn't seem like DC animation really cares whether or not there's an audience. They'll just keep pumping it out as long as someone lets them.
Fair enough. Did you watch the new fucking... We were talking about it at the beginning of the episode. Now, Legion of Superheroes
The Supergirl one?
Did you like that?
Yeah, it was alright.
Yeah, it was alright. I agree. That was kind of my vibe. Oh, it was okay.
I liked the stuff with her and Brainiac 5 a lot. The rest of it, I could kind of... Yeah,
Mon-El sucked.
The rest of it... Yeah.
Mon-El sucked. Brainiac was pretty cool.
The rest of the Legion stuff and the Superman stuff I could take or leave, but I liked Kara and Brainiac, and I liked their romantic chemistry a lot. Animation also was not terrible, which is surprising.
Yeah. Alright. That's all I had for that. Did we have anything else to talk about with My Adventures of Superman? Oh, wait, I've got a question. who's me? Who's Adventures with Superman? Is Lois the main character? Is it Jimmy? Is this about Clark's Adventures with Superman? I feel like the title doesn't fit the premise of the show.
There we go. It's gonna come out as gonna be fucking Mixelplug.
You see,
There we go.
it's actually about the experience. And My Adventures with Superman is your own personal journey with the animated series and how you come away with it emotionally.
There you go.
I mean, it just feels like we were talking about Jimmy for a long time there, and then the fact that, like, the show's called My Adventures with Superman, and the series, like, credits is Jimmy walking in fucking, like, anime background style, and I'm like, so is this the Jimmy show? Is that what it was supposed to be initially? And then just no one besides the end credits people, like, or everyone besides the end credits people, just got the memo that no, we're gonna change it and make it a romance. Like, what's going on here? I need answers.
I do really like the title. It is a little weird and ambiguous. Like, episode 3 is called My Interview with Superman, so like clearly that's from Lois's perspective. So like it's not like there's a central character where that's stemming from. But I do like the title. I like that it's so inviting, so kind of naturally just being like a reintroduction to Superman thematically, but also just literally. And I like that it feels, especially from like the opening credits, it's got a theme song, by the way. I fucking love that it's got a theme. The fact that a cartoon exists with an intro in this day and age blows my mind, and I love it. But you get that intro and he has like that image of him whizzing by and he's just winking at the camera. I was being a little facetious, but I don't think I was wrong when I said the whole idea of like My Adventures with Superman is meant to just kind of be the audience. It's meant to be that idea of just you're going on this journey with Clark and you're having adventures with Superman as he discovers who he is. And as different characters take center stage, the might shift to them, but at the end of the day, it is that sort of collective. This is a show for a new generation of people, and it's your adventures with Superman.
Fair enough. All right. Well, that's all I had for this. Did anyone have anything else they really needed to talk about before we wrapped up here? Ooh,
I don't hate
spicy.
it. It's just I liked the original concept art better.
I
like the original concept art better, and in episode 3 in particular, the two-tone blue is hideous. I don't like it.
I think it looks fine in motion. Like, I think in the show itself, it looks just fine. I think only when you pause it and you look closer at it does it look bad. I think the issue I have with it is, again, I agree with you, Steve. I like a lot of the concept art for it better. These two pieces of concept art, and for a lot of this show, I like the concept art better. The Livewire concept art is leagues better than the Livewire design they got in the show. I don't know what the fuck they were doing with that. But the
Oh shit! Can I trash talk their Livewire
Go
just a
for it.
little bit more
Go
for
for
1
it.
second? Okay, this is a trope that bothers me of intentionally making a character of color and then taking away their color to make them blue or green or whatever. That's a trope that really bothers me. This show, I'll give it a pass because, I mean, Lois and Jimmy get to be, not white, so that's nice. But, I don't know. That's a trope that really bothers. It's Livewire, and she's not, a white bitch. Okay. And then she turns blue, and this show might just be that she's just going to eventually permanently turn blue. I'm like, okay. I guess. I like Livewire to be do the pale skin and the creepy vibe. That's what I prefer. But if you're gonna make her a character of color, you should probably keep that. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like the show. I think it's fun. I enjoyed watching the first 2 episodes on a Saturday morning, sipping my coffee, and I enjoyed doing it again with 3. So if I just have a 20-minute cartoon to watch while I have my breakfast in the morning on weekends, I'm kind of here for it.
Nice. Alrighty. Well, Alfie, you haven't been here for a minute, so I'm going to tell you to pick something to talk about next time. So, go for it.
To talk about next time.
Barbenheimer.
Oppenheimer. I mean, I don't think Ian's going to be able to go see Oppenheimer.
Or Barbie.
Shit, you might be able to go see Barbie. Does Leia like Barbies?
We're not taking Leah to the theater again
Okay.
for a while. Both The Little Mermaid and Across the Spider-Verse were a bit of a fucking disaster, so we're not taking Leah to the movie theater for a while, guys.
You don't think she's gonna be riveted by the 3-hour story of the man who made the nuclear bomb?
That the other day we were talking, and she did kind of give me an indication she was interested in that when she went for like 10 minutes straight. So that might be.
So outside of that,
Let's talk about beatbox.
Have we ever talked about Marvels on Geeky Gentleman? The Alex Ross, Mark Waid thing?
No, I think I only did a trade talk on it, so I'd be willing to do the long form review.
We can talk
with
about
you guys.
Marvels and maybe if we have, because there's a lot of like that type of project. So let's just do Marvels for now, and then if we like that, maybe down the line we can look at some of the other. Because we did Peace and Earth with Superman, and there's like a couple other ones in that like franchise. Like there's Alex Ross like perennials. We can maybe do like the Fantastic Four one sometime after or something. But let's just do Marvels for now, if that works for everyone.
Oh, I'm here for it.
Works for me. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I am the champion of the oppressed.
And I am the oppressor.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.